It wasn't until the night I heard the scratching on the basement door that I realized the truth about what had been living in our house all along. And that night, the house wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. Title: The Haunting of the Bellwood House. In the small town of Bellwood, Pennsylvania, nestled between the dense forests and winding rivers, there stood a house that everyone in town avoided. Locals whispered about its history, claiming that it was cursed, haunted, and home to something far darker than mere ghosts. The house had belonged to the Hartman family for generations, but after a string of mysterious deaths in the early 1970s, the property was abandoned. The story begins in 1987, when the Johnson family, recently moved from Ohio, purchased the Bellwood house for a suspiciously low price. Michael Johnson, a young father, thought it was a bargain. His wife, Ellen, tried to voice her concern, but the lure of cheap real estate won over her instincts. Their children, 12-year-old Sarah and 8-year-old Tommy, were fascinated by the old, creaking house and the dense woods surrounding it. From the first night, strange things began to happen. The family reported hearing whispers in empty rooms, doors opening and closing on their own, and objects moving without explanation. The children insisted that they saw a shadow man in the hallway, tall, faceless, and always watching. Michael dismissed it as childish imagination, but Ellen felt a growing unease, sensing that the house itself was alive and malevolent. Within weeks, the incidents escalated. Sarah began sleepwalking, talking to someone unseen in the middle of the night. She described a cold man with empty eyes who told her secrets, dark secrets about the house and the people who had lived there. Tommy complained about nightmares so vivid that he would wake screaming, claiming that something had been under the bed, staring. One particularly harrowing night, Michael stayed up late in the study. He thought he heard faint footsteps coming from the basement. At first, he assumed it was the old house settling. But then he heard it, a low, guttural growl, followed by scratching at the basement door. Frozen, he listened as the sounds circled the room, moving from one end to the house's walls to the other. It wasn't human. The next morning, Michael inspected the basement. There was nothing there, except strange symbols etched into the walls and floor, symbols that no one in town could recognize. Historian and paranormal expert Dr. Evelyn Carr, who was later called to investigate, identified the markings as part of an obscure 18th century ritual. The symbols, she explained, were intended to trap a spirit, but clearly something had escaped. By the third week, the family could no longer ignore the entity. Objects flew across rooms, sometimes narrowly missing the children. Shadows would crawl across the walls in impossible angles. Worst of all, the family began to notice that the shadow man seemed to feed off fear. The more terrified they were, the bolder it became. Sarah, the eldest, confided to her diary, "It knows what I think. It sees what I do. I can't hide from it. It waits." Dr. Carr brought in equipment to record the paranormal activity. Cameras captured orbs of light moving in unnatural patterns, and audio devices recorded voices that whispered in dead languages, chanting incomprehensible words. But the most chilling evidence came when motion sensors in the house detected rapid movements of something not human, 8 feet tall, moving with unnatural speed, and vanishing whenever a human approached. The town's local police were called after a series of break-ins were reported, but they found no signs of trespassers. One officer, who later refused to talk on record, admitted that he felt watched during the visit, and that shadows seemed to move against the flow of light. By the 4th month, Ellen and Michael began seeing visions of the previous occupants. They saw the Hartman family, or rather, shadows of them, reliving their final moments in the house, some frozen in death, some screaming in eternal terror. Ellen reported smelling decay, seeing bloodstains reappear on floors that had long been cleaned. At times, she claimed the shadow man would stand beside the bed, its cold presence palpable, whispering, "You can't leave." Not yet. The culmination came on a stormy night in July 1988. Lightning illuminated the house as a deafening roar echoed through the halls. The children disappeared from their rooms. Michael and Ellen ran through the house, calling their names, only to find them in the basement, staring blankly at the walls, covered in fresh symbols, chanting in unison words neither parent recognized. The shadow man loomed behind them, eyes hollow and dark, its presence pressing down like a weight. Dr. Carr later analyzed the recordings and diaries and concluded that the entity was not a ghost in the traditional sense. It was a residual consciousness, born from ritualistic practices centuries earlier, feeding on the fear and life force of those who entered its domain. The Johnson family managed to flee the house after a violent confrontation, but neighbors claimed that the property remained alive, with strange lights, sounds, and shadows continuing long after. Chapter 2. The History That Refused to Die. Long before the Johnsons arrived, the Bellwood house had a history that most townspeople only whispered about. Built in 1784 by the Hartman family, it was originally intended as a safe haven for religious exiles fleeing persecution. At first, the house was a symbol of hope, a fortress of stone and timber, surrounded by dense forest. But soon, tragedies began to mount. Records show that in 1792, the eldest Hartman son, Frederick, disappeared in the woods. Locals claimed he had been lured by a dark presence near the creek that ran behind the property. The creek was later called Whispering Brook because, according to legend, it carried the cries of the lost into the night. Over the next century, multiple Hartman descendants met untimely and mysterious deaths. 1847, a fire consumed the west wing of the house, claiming 2 children. Neighbors swore they saw shadowy figures dragging the children away before the flames engulfed the room. 1923, the Hartman patriarch Matthias vanished during a family gathering. He was never found, but the family dog was discovered in the basement, dead, with its fur scorched off in strange patterns. 1971, the final family to live in the house, the Hartmans, all died within 2 months of each other. Official reports cited natural causes, but Dr. Carr discovered evidence of ritualistic markings etched into the walls and floors, eerily similar to what the Johnsons encountered decades later. Investigating deeper, Dr. Carr found references to a sect of European mystics who emigrated to Pennsylvania in the late 1700s. Their goal was to trap spirits and channel power through fear, using ancient symbols and incantations. Many of these mystics were known for extreme practices, including binding spirits to objects and locations to create living darkness. It became clear that the Bellwood house was more than haunted. It was a trap, a location designed to draw human energy into itself. This explained why the Johnson family had experienced escalating attacks. The house had been feeding for over 2 centuries. Chapter 3. Escalation. By the 5th month of living in the house, the Johnsons' experiences became unbearable. Michael documented events in a notebook, noting every sighting and sound. January 14, 1988, Sarah awoke screaming. When Michael entered her room, the shadow man was standing at the foot of her bed, its form taller than the ceiling. Her room smelled of burnt sulfur. February 3, 1988. Tommy's drawings of the basement revealed grotesque figures with long claws and hollow eyes, figures he claimed he had never seen while awake. March 12, 1988. Ellen reported hearing chanting from behind the walls. On opening the wall panel, she found a hollow cavity containing tiny bones arranged in a ritualistic pattern. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the windows at odd hours and hearing voices chanting unintelligible words. Some claim to see silhouettes moving in ways impossible for humans. Dr. Carr installed sophisticated equipment, EMF readers, thermal cameras, and audio recorders. She captured chilling evidence. Footsteps descending stairs when no one was present. Objects propelled across rooms with forces exceeding human strength. Figures visible only in thermal imaging, moving faster than the human eye could track. Chapter 4: The Shadow Man. Over time, the entity revealed more of itself. It was not merely reactive, it was intelligent. Sarah described conversations with it. It says my name. It knows what I fear. It wants us to stay, but it laughs when we try. It says, I belong to the house now. The Shadow Man seemed tied to the house itself. Dr. Carr theorized that it was a residual consciousness, amplified by centuries of ritualistic practices. Even ordinary household objects, lamps, chairs, mirrors, became conduits for its energy. In one terrifying event, the Johnsons attempted to leave for a weekend. As they packed the car, they noticed deep scratches across the walls of the hallway leading to the front door. The scratches formed a pattern matching the symbols Dr. Carr had identified as binding rituals. It was as if the house itself was punishing them for attempting escape. Chapter 5: Confrontation. The final night in the Bellwood house was a stormy July evening in 1988. Lightning revealed the full horror of the house. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Orbs of light hovered in the corners, and whispers filled every room. The Johnsons realized that the Shadow Man was attempting to consume their life energy. Michael tried to destroy the symbols in the basement, but every mark reappeared the next moment. The Shadow Man emerged fully from the darkness, its eyes black voids, limbs stretching impossibly, its voice a mixture of every person who had ever died in the house. You cannot leave. The house needs you. In a desperate bid, Dr. Carr instructed them to recite protective prayers and use salt to create barriers. The entity shrieked and retreated, but the damage was permanent. The family was left traumatized, and the house remained alive, continuing to attract attention from trespassers and thrill-seekers. Chapter 6: Echoes from the Past. After the Johnson family narrowly escaped, Dr. Evelyn Carr delved even deeper into the history of the Hartman lineage. What she found was a chain of events so dark, it seemed almost impossible to survive. The Hartmans were not just ordinary settlers. They were known to have associations with occult societies of early Pennsylvania. Records unearthed from the Lancaster County Historical Society indicated that the Hartmans practiced esoteric rituals involving spirit binding, necromancy, and elemental invocation. According to court records, neighbors complained of screams and strange lights coming from the Bellwood house as early as the 1790s. One document, an old diary from Frederick Hartman, the son who disappeared in 1792, mentioned, I hear them every night. They whisper through the walls. The house drinks fear. I am their servant, whether I will or no. Dr. Carr concluded that the house itself acted as a psychic amplifier, feeding on the emotions of its occupants, particularly fear and despair. The Shadow Man was not merely a spirit, it was an accumulated consciousness, created from centuries of suffering. Chapter 7: Unseen Witnesses. Though the Johnsons fled, other witnesses occasionally ventured near the property. A group of teenagers in 1994 reported the following: lights flickering in rooms that were clearly empty, doors slamming violently when no one touched them, whispered names echoing through the trees. Sarah, Tommy, come back. One teen captured a photograph of a shadowy figure standing in the front window. Analysis by Dr. Pony Bello. Carr's team later confirmed that the figure's thermal signature was inconsistent with any human or animal. Locals avoided the house altogether. Farmers reported cattle mysteriously refusing to graze near the property, and dogs would howl at the woods behind the house, even during broad daylight. The house had developed a reputation not just for haunting, but as a psychic magnet, attracting negative energy and amplifying fear. Chapter 8. The Johnson Family Recounts. Years later, the Johnson family gave interviews under anonymity. Michael described, "The house, it felt alive. It was like walking into a breathing creature. Every step we took, it was aware. We couldn't hide, we couldn't run. Every corner, every shadow, it was there." Ellen added, "Even now, years later, I still feel its eyes watching me. I never thought fear could be alive." But Bellwood House, it was alive, and it was angry. Sarah, now an adult, revealed that she still dreams of the house. "I see the basement symbols. I hear the chanting. Sometimes I wake up knowing it's still there, waiting for the next family." Dr. Carr emphasized that this was not a typical haunting. It was a case of paranormal accumulation, where decades of ritual, death, and fear created a persistent, malevolent entity. Chapter 9. The Shadow Man's Nature. Through analysis of the Johnsons' recordings and Dr. Carr's historical research, several patterns emerged. First, the Shadow Man feeds on fear. The more terrified the occupants, the more powerful and tangible it becomes. Second, it can manipulate reality. Objects fly, doors slam, and shadows extend beyond natural angles. Sleepwalking, hallucinations, and possession-like behavior are common among those who stay long. It is tied to the house. Attempts to burn, destroy, or even renovate the house do not eliminate the entity. It adapts. Dr. Carr documented the Bellwood House as one of the most extreme cases she had ever investigated. A structure that actively manipulated human perception and exploited emotional vulnerabilities. Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. The Johnsons' escape was only temporary. By the late 1990s, thrill-seekers and paranormal investigators began testing the house again. One particularly harrowing account came from a team of 3 investigators in 1998. Cameras captured shadowy appendages stretching along walls and ceilings, moving independently of light sources. Audio devices recorded voices from previous victims, including the Hartman children and Frederick Hartman. One investigator reported feeling pressure on his chest, as though the house itself was trying to pull him inside. The Shadow Man appeared directly in their footage for the first time. A tall, featureless figure, its presence alone causing equipment to malfunction. One investigator screamed and fainted. The others fled. By the time police arrived, the investigators were disoriented, reporting visions of old deaths and impossible architecture inside the house. This evidence cemented the Bellwood House as one of the most dangerous paranormal locations in the U.S. History. Chapter 11. Legacy of Fear. Even today, the house stands, untouched and uninhabited. The local township refused to sell or renovate it. Paranormal enthusiasts continue to visit, though many leave abruptly, shaken and terrified. Dr. Carr warned that the Shadow Man and the house itself is likely immortal as long as the building stands, feeding on each new visitor who dares enter. Bellwood House is more than haunted. It is a living relic of human fear and ancient rituals, a monument to terror accumulated over centuries. As Michael Johnson once wrote in his journal, "The house waits, it watches, and it will never stop."